So this is the camera. The Sony A7C II packs mind-blowing technology into one of the smallest full-frame bodies ever made. This unprecedented combination made it instantly popular and one of the best options for shooting on the streets or when traveling. But it has been 2 years since this camera was released. Is it still worth it? Let's find out. For the last 2 years, the Sony A7C II has been my main camera for street photography, for capturing street and travel B-roll, and also for filming all the YouTube videos you see here. So today I'm going to share with you the pros, the cons, and whether this camera is still worth it. I won't dive into technical specs much, because there are plenty of videos out there for that. Instead, I will share my experience after using the camera in real and everyday situations. And by the way, this is not a sponsor video. I bought this camera with my own money and no one has influenced my opinions. Alright, let's get started. First and foremost, let's talk about user experience, since not many people talk about that. A great thing about the Sony A7C II is that it comes with a large number of buttons and dials. And the best part, all of them are highly customizable. Actually, this is one of the most customizable cameras I have ever used. You can literally assign a function to every button or dial and make it work the way you want it. For example, it has 4 different dials, which means you can assign each one to control shutter speed, aperture, and ISO or exposure, and still have one more to spare for other use cases. You can also customize the buttons and add handy capabilities like tracking movie subjects or using zebras for exposing S-Log video, and the list goes on. Due to this flexibility, the Sony A7C II can become a very pleasant camera to use. You won't have to dig into the settings too much to find the right function, since you will have probably already assigned a button for it. People usually say that Sony cameras are not fun to use and they're just a tool to get the job done. I would say this depends on your personality. For a person like me, which is very practical and focuses on efficiency rather than flashy looks or features, I would say this camera is an absolute pleasure to use. It is also worth mentioning how responsive the Sony A7C II is. For example, powering on and off the camera only takes a fraction of the second. Also, switching between photo and video mode happens literally instantly. This is very useful, especially when I'm capturing street photos and want to quickly switch over and capture B-roll of the same scene. Overall, the user experience with this camera is excellent. It's very responsive, highly customizable, and practical to use. And all of that makes life a lot easier when you're out shooting. One area this camera really shines is low light performance. Having a full-frame sensor certainly helps, but I believe the Sony A7C II takes it a step further. Let me show you what I mean. When it comes to photography, I can shoot on the streets at night and get away with even using higher f-stops like f4 or cracking up the ISO up to 6400 and getting pretty clean and sharp images. These photos are a pretty good example of what I'm talking about. Of course, the YouTube compression may affect how these photos look on your screen, but hopefully you get a good idea. For video, the low light performance is just as impressive. I love shooting on dimly lit streets and capturing atmospheric ambient scenes in cities like Tokyo, and so far the results have completely exceeded my expectations. Footage shot at high ISO values are perfectly usable, and sometimes I can increase the ISO up to 1200 and still get away with usable footage. I also use the Sony A7C II to record my talking head videos like the one you're watching right now, so you can already get a sense of its performance. In short, this camera is a beast and can handle both photo and video equally well, even in low light situations. There are not many cameras nowadays that can do that, and it's something you should not take for granted. Probably the biggest selling point of the Sony A7C II is how small the camera is, and I have to say it's probably worth every penny just for this reason alone. If you have told me a few years back that we would have such powerful cameras in such a compact body, I would not be able to believe it. The Sony A7C II practically has the same size of an APS-C camera. For example, if you pair it with a Zeiss 35mm lens and compare it with another popular street camera like the Fujifilm X100VI, it has almost the same size and weight. Of course, full-frame lenses can get bigger pretty quickly, but if you're using this camera with smaller prime lenses, you can keep the size at very reasonable levels. I can't overstate how important it is to have a compact size camera when shooting street photography. Especially when using wider lenses like 28 or 35mm, being invisible is crucial for capturing candid moments. The same applies when you're traveling a lot or visiting remote areas. Carrying lightweight gear can make or break your trip, and trust me, your back will thank you. Another big advantage of the Sony A7C II is its in-body image stabilization, which is rated at 7 stops. I have no idea how they managed to pack this feature in such a small camera, but all I have to say is that it makes a big difference. For photography, this means I can now shoot handheld at slower shutter speeds of even 1 second, something I could only do with a tripod before. I know it sounds hard to believe, I also couldn't believe it myself at first, so here are some of my captures along with their settings. I have managed to capture handheld shots up to 1.3 seconds and still have the photos look sharp. When it comes to video, the Sony A7C II delivers smooth handheld shots, making street B-roll look much steadier. To help with this, the camera offers several stabilization modes. The standard mode uses mechanical in-body stabilization to reduce minor camera shakes, and it comes with no crop. The active mode adds digital stabilization for extra support when shooting handheld, but it crops the image slightly. Since the latest firmware update in April 2025, Sony has also added the dynamic active mode. This provides even more aggressive stabilization, designed to eliminate shake even while walking. It comes with 1.5 times crop, but the results are really impressive. Having all these capabilities in such a compact body at this price point makes the Sony A7C II hard to beat. And honestly, what else can we ask for? Last but not least, we cannot talk about Sony cameras these days without mentioning the state-of-the-art autofocus system. And all the rumors you have already heard are true. Thanks to its AI-powered technology, the Sony A7C II still delivers some of the best autofocus performance even 2 years after its release. Honestly, I barely even think about the autofocus when using this camera. It's so good that I just take it for granted. The camera focuses quickly and accurately, even in low light. I hardly ever run into missed focus when shooting photos or video, and when I do, it's usually my own mistake or during very challenging situations. It's not just the quality of the autofocus, but also the huge number of options that come with it. For example, you can set the camera to prioritize focus on humans, animals, cars, trains, and even insects. For photography, there is a wide range of focus modes like wide autofocus, movable zones, spot focusing, and even advanced tracking modes. When it comes to video, you have the option to adjust the autofocus transition speed or autofocus sensitivity, enable focus peaking for more accurate focusing, and the list goes on. All these features combined give the camera some serious filmmaking capabilities. At the end of the day, the autofocus in the Sony A7C II is reliable, versatile, and gives you a less thing to worry about while shooting. This is probably the biggest pain point and one that bothers me the most. Rolling shutter is this jello effect that makes straight vertical lines look bent. It happens when the camera is moving faster than the sensor can fully scan. Since the Sony A7C II has a sensor with slow readout speeds, you end up with this effect. Rolling shutter is more obvious when shooting video. When filming fast-moving objects like cars or trains, you will easily notice the distortion, especially if the moving object is close to the camera. The same issue happens when you're panning the camera to capture fast action. Vertical lines start to bend and the frame looks distorted. The only way to minimize rolling shutter is by keeping your camera movement slow and smooth when panning. When you're filming fast-moving objects while the camera is static, there is no way you can avoid rolling shutter, even if you are using higher shutter speeds. It's just a limitation of the sensor. When it comes to photography, the good thing is that rolling shutter is less of an issue, but it can still be noticeable in some situations. It becomes more apparent when photographing using the silent mode, which basically disables the mechanical shutter. If you try to photograph a fast-moving object that is close to you using the silent mode, you may notice some rolling shutter distortion. In order to avoid that, when photographing fast-moving objects, I always recommend using the mechanical shutter instead. I have tried shooting fast-moving objects and panning shots with it, and I haven't seen any noticeable rolling shutter effect so far. Another thing that bothers me, but I would say it's not a deal breaker, is how loud the mechanical shutter is. In still photography, being as discreet as possible is key, especially when you're using wider focal lenses like 28 or 35mm and you need to get closer to your subject. In many occasions I had people turn and stare at me when they heard the shutter, which completely ruined the candid moment I was going for. To avoid this, I often switch to silent mode, but of course that comes with its own limitations. As we already discussed, the silent mode introduces rolling shutter, which makes it tricky to capture fast-moving objects like cars and trains. Also, if you're shooting indoors or under artificial lights with electronic shutter, you will often get light banding, which can easily ruin a shot. In those situations, I have no choice but to go back to the mechanical shutter, drawing attention again with its loud click. At the end of the day, nothing is perfect. With a full-frame sensor, you eventually need a bigger shutter, and that extra noise is a trade-off you have to make. Alright, so far we have covered all the pros and cons of the Sony A7C II, but is it still worth it 2 years after its release? Before we answer that, let's see how much it costs and how it compares to other popular options. As of September 2025, the cheapest option for the Sony A7C II is around €2,100 in Europe and $2,200 in the US. The good news is that Sony often offers cashback promotions, so you might be able to grab it for even less in the future. Looking at alternatives, the Canon R6 Mark II is another hybrid full-frame camera at a similar price point. But it is a much larger camera, and I personally don't see myself doing street photography or traveling with a camera of this size. You could also consider APS-C cameras. The Sony A7C II is excellent value for money option, and you get the same quality and size as the Sony A7C II, but it costs less. The trade-off is a smaller sensor, which affects performance in some areas, like when shooting in low light. Another popular hybrid option for street or travel content is the Fujifilm X-T5. It is priced around €1,800 in Europe or $1,900 in the US. It also has an APS-C sensor, but it is a noticeably larger camera. All of these highlight how much value for money the Sony A7C II offers. Don't get me wrong, $2,000 or euros is a lot of money, but for this price tag you get a full-frame camera that has superior image quality for both photo and video. If you mainly focus on shooting travel or street content and you need a compact camera for your trips, then I believe the Sony A7C II worth every penny. Even 2 years after its release, I haven't seen any other camera offering the same value for money at this compact size. For me personally, since I mostly focus on street photography, filming street B-roll, and I travel a lot, the Sony A7C II has been my go-to camera for the past 2 years, and I expect it will stay with me for many more years to come. But also let me know what do you think about the Sony A7C II and which camera you choose for shooting in the streets or when traveling. And that's all for today, folks. Happy shooting, and see you again next time.